Nikki.
Hi there. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for joining me with this interview.
Of course.
I'm going to just introduce you for a second. This is Nikki Zuaro, and I met Nikki through my SCAD online grad school program, and I'm just really inspired by her work, and so I thought it would be fun to talk to her here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Maggie. I appreciate it. Um, so I guess I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I'm originally from Long Island, New York. Was born and raised there. Did my undergrad in studio art, concentrating in painting and photography. And then I took 2 years off. And I worked in Manhattan because I went back down to Long Island. So I commuted. I worked in Manhattan at Christie's auction house, working as an intern there. It was pretty nice.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, like I thought that's like what I wanted to do for a really long time. And after interning with them, I realized like, although this is a wonderful experience, it just like, it wasn't really what I had in mind, like for myself, for my future. So
It's not as
decided,
romantic as it looks.
yeah. I mean, it is and it isn't because you're surrounded by like the artwork that we see in art history classes and everything like that, which is like the best part of it. It was just, you know, it just wasn't like I just didn't feel a connection with like what I wanted to do. Like my passion wasn't there with it. So I decided to, look into like grad school because I knew I eventually wanted to go back, but I, you know, I didn't really know when. And then I was like, you know what, this is probably a good time anyway. And so I did that. I found SCAD. Never visited Georgia before. So I just, when I got accepted, moved down here blindly. So I've been in Savannah. Yeah, it
Big
was,
change from Manhattan to Savannah, huh?
oh yeah,
Culturally.
it's much slower. Much slower, but I really do enjoy it here. I think there's a really great art community.
Good food too, huh? Do they have good?
Yeah. I have to say it's pretty good. You know, some things I miss, but yeah. So then, I'm in the painting program, getting my MFA on ground technically. The way I met you was through a few online courses that was only being offered online, and then COVID happened. We had like I think like another two classes together, right? Like
Yeah.
class last quarter and now this quarter.
Did you take
Um,
spring class together too? Did you? Were you on when the
in our
spring?
in which one?
Were you in one of my spring classes when COVID hit, or just that summer class, right, where you were at home? Was that the beginning?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, it was in the summer. Yeah, I wasn't sure if we had one earlier in the
somewhere.
year, like in the quarters or whatever, but yeah, that was a blur for me.
It's
So,
all a blur.
yeah, so I came here pretty intimidated and then realized everyone was in the same boat as me. So it was pretty nice solidarity there. And then, traditionally a painter, and I found a lot of frustration with my paintings, and I really wanted to explore different ideas than what I was like originally doing, which was like a lot of like heavy bodied acrylics, with like a lot of abstract figures, and using spray paint as one of my main mediums. So I
Really,
wanted to.
I would like to see what those look like. If you ever do, you ever show them or have? Where
No, I haven't shown them in years because I
yeah,
just
it's
uh,
really different gear.
yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm totally not in that same mindset anymore. Um, so I took this class with Professor Todd Schroeder called Experimental and Conceptual Art, and it opened my mind up to so many different things that I didn't even realize I enjoyed and thought were possible to make art out of, really, because I was in the painting program. So taking all of these chance-based ideas and putting it forward in my own ideas and promoting it in my own work was really like eye-opening and really changed a lot for me. um, So that's how I started really doing a lot of conceptual based work, which is where I'm at right now.
When
Yeah.
was that class that you took with Todd? Was that like in the winter, in this fall?
It was in the winter of uh or it was in the winter or early spring. I think it was in the early spring of last year.
Okay, so
Yeah,
2019.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, 2019. Yeah, because I felt like I was very frustrated with the work I was making, and I felt real no connection to it. I felt like it wasn't really like I wasn't really embodying what I wanted to talk about, which was like this cycle um, of how well it was like this at first. It was, you know, the cycle of how nature is being overtaken and being progressed by our own like society and how we're growing as like a community, but it's also detrimental to the environment. And then eventually when we find no more use for that certain building or whatever that we destroyed the environment for, um, then like nature takes that back over, and it's just kind of like a never ending cycle. But like, and it's almost like this like war and like push and pull of us versus nature, even though we're part of nature and we're, you know, kind of destroying it as we go along. It's in some sense. So I really liked the idea of cycles and repetition. And so when I was taking this class with Todd, you know, that was like one of like the main things I focused on was like this type of repetition. And, you know, we did a bunch of sound pieces, word pieces, just to kind of get our minds going. And I ended up, you know, using the earth to create sound, but also using tools to make the sound from the earth. Um, and it kind of just developed, and I was still finding a frustration because, you know, I from there decided to like dig this hole to make a sculpture. And this is where it all started. I decided to dig a hole to make a sculpture out of concrete that I like put in the ground and kind of made an earth casting. Um, and I found so much more enjoyment and satisfaction in the process of digging the hole than actually the final product of a sculpture. Um, and so I, you know, decided to take that and run with it, because I had another professor that said, "Oh, why don't you make work about frustration?" And I was like, that's really great advice. So I was like, what's more frustrating than digging a hole that has no purpose and then filling it back in just to like strain myself in a physical action that really has no real meaning but just to dig a hole and do nothing with it, because holes are traditionally have a purpose. You know, you dig a hole for a fence post, you know, a grave, you know, like things like that seem so are arbitrary in our daily lives that we don't realize that these small things have a purpose. So like when you're digging a hole that has no purpose, then what is it really become? um,
Yeah.
so it's like all this frustration and existential ideas that started developing behind it is where you know, I'm at now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing that resonated with me when I first started hearing about these ideas that you were exploring was this idea of labor too, and the
Oh
division
yeah.
of labor, and how that all transpires in your work, you know, and that is all that labor in digging. There's that in that you've captured it in such a kind of unique, interesting way to me.
Mm-hmm.
I had, you know, being in a painting program, you know, I'm kind of now I'm a little older, you know, than you are, and I had this traditional ideas of like who is going to be in this painting program with me, and what else were we going to be doing, you know. But
Yeah.
I too kind of went in a little bit blindly about when I decided to do this. So I was like, if I get in, I'll go. If I don't, I won't. You know, I mean, it was kind of
Yeah.
I can't believe they let me in, you know, kind of idea
Yeah. Of
when I
course.
first started. But and so, you know, I had somebody in a drawing class, and I thought, well, we're all supposed to be drawing, but this guy was painting, and then I was in a painting class and somebody was drawing, and I was like, wait, painting. And then we take this other painting class and you're doing the video with digging of the holes, and then I started listening to your ideas and I was like, this is so cool. I love what she's doing, and it's so intentional and
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that.
exploratory, you know. So I
Yeah.
just thought it was really cool. So I thought it'd be fun to chat with you about that stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that. People looked at me, some people looked at me like it was a little crazy at first, and but my friends were super supportive and continue to be, which is nice.
Well, I think the way that you're doing what you're doing is really professional too, and I think it really it it offers your viewer this opportunity to engage in new ideas, and so I think that the way that you're doing it has been super successful too.
Thank you. And in a way, like, I see a lot of my action-oriented labor tasks like as a form of painting, even though it's not a traditional form of painting. I'm taking like all of the tools and the things my education, things I've learned in the past, that what is painting, is pushing pigment around on a canvas. That's what it's technically, it is. You're that's what you're doing. So I see, digging a hole almost the same way, or even like sweeping the street or scrubbing a canvas in the same way, because it's not that like I'm adding something to a surface, rather than I'm pushing something around, or subtracting something, like subtracting substrate from something else. And the repetition of movement also reminds me of painting as well. So it's, for me, it's all about the movement and the process of, what is painting to me, at least, and how I view painting and how I can incorporate that in other areas of artwork that I, explore.
Nelson's asking me to let him out, so I have to
No problem.
before he starts barking it. Zoom is just okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. So what do you've got a couple more classes to finish up this one, or
So this is my last class.
this is the last?
So, yes, this is my last one, thesis 790. But I'm taking the extension. So, how SCAD offers that free extension at the end. So I feel like, for me personally, I think I would benefit from it, because I am, I want to make sure my thesis is polished as possible. And, I'm struggling a little bit writing it. Not writing it, because it's pretty much all laid out there. It's just like really like editing it and like adding things in there and make sure it all makes sense, and just trying to make it as perfect as I can, and then doing an exhibition that is worthwhile as well, because COVID state right now it's a little difficult, and
A
I
little,
want it
a
a
little,
little
a
a
little
little
bit. It's a little,
difficult.
yeah. It's a little
Yeah,
added layer of this isn't what I planned on doing.
exactly. So I figured, why not, if we're in this state of of emergency. Technically, in my head, I think we're still in a state of emergency, even if we really aren't.
Well, I think it's
Yeah.
so you'll get one more semester as a grad student, which will be nice.
Yes, just with no like real classes. It's just focusing on the thesis and focusing on the exhibition and figuring out all the components to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you want to do when you're done?
Well, I would like to be a professor, maintain a studio practice. I'd love to do residencies, just travel when we can, do that type of stuff, really, what's the romanticized version of what I want it to be, but I know what it's not going to be for a little while.
I think it's such a fun, like the ideas of things sometimes can be so much more romantic and enjoyable than, like, I had a gallery for a year, and I loved it the first like 6 months of that experience, and then I was like, I don't like this part anymore. You know? But now I think going into it, I would go into it with a different state of mind. But
Yeah.
I think you will be a fantastic professor too. And then just keeping that studio practice going. And I know have you been, there's so many, I mean, I feel like there's opportunities out there that are just different than we first like
Oh yeah.
imagine. Like what does it look like now doing an installation project or a video project, or where,
Hmm.
where do those get seen now? Do you have a spot for your show?
Not yet. I'm planning on doing it in early February,
Oh, cool.
but I'm searching at the moment for spots. I would like to do it in person and do a nice installation, maybe even do a performance one night, like one night only type of thing. So that's like, basic surface level ideas that I have for that. I don't really know the spot that I would want it, because again, like my work is a little untraditional in the sense of how I would hang stuff,
Yeah.
hang my work, because a lot of it's video and then a lot of it is sculpture, and then there is a few pieces that are on canvas. Um, so it's just kind of like figuring out how I would do all that type of installation and how we would want to set it up, and if I would want it to be like this big grandiose thing or more of like a small select
Interesting.
curated objects that would go along with my performance. So it's kind of like up in the air of trying to figure out how exactly I want to do this, because I feel like there's a multitude of ways I could do it, and this could be overwhelming, but I'm trying to figure it out.
I think you'll do amazing.
Thanks.
You'll make it work really well.
Yeah.
I have no doubt in my mind. But
Yep.
yeah. So so is there anything else you want to
I mean, I could walk you through some work if you want.
Yeah. Can you
Yeah.
show your screen? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, I have like let me just pull up here. I could literally show you the stuff that I showed in my review if you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's
That would be
see.
great. I
Um,
love the one of you in the work boots digging at the beach and the
oh, here we go. Share screen. Um, host disabled attendees
oh,
screen share.
how do I
Sorry.
fix that's okay. Let's see. How do I fix it?
I don't know.
How do I do that? Let's see. There we there we go. Does that work?
Okay. Yes.
Yay. I didn't even know that was an option. Good to know.
All right. Are you seeing it?
Yes, yeah.
All right, cool. So I just have like the screenshots of my videos. So I mean, I could always give you the link for that later. That
That would
you,
be
if you
great.
would love to, yeah, put that up there. But so like I was telling you earlier, I did video that I explored digging holes as artwork, and it developed, from a very basic hole in my backyard to changing locations and figuring out what would be like the most frustrating way for me to dig a hole. And one of these was digging a hole in the sand at the beach, like right at the water line. So when I'm digging, the hole is just naturally being filled in by the water and the waves crashing in on me. And I'm wearing my work boots, so they're getting wet and they're gross and heavy, and the sand is super heavy. And I'm just constantly like in this state of it almost becomes like, I like to call it, a form of destructive meditation, um, where I'm digging a hole as my body is starting to get tired, but I'm really focused on what's happening in front of me. So it's almost like this idea of like Zen that's coming through that, John Cage talked about when, he was doing all his stuff. So, that's, digging in the sand. I recorded it and it's pretty much not edited. Um, as raw as I can do it, with a few different edits, but I wanted it to be like a form of documentation, um, rather than like an aesthetic visual pleasure. even though I do consider it when I'm shooting my angles, that's I feel like different than when you're going back and editing the video itself. So I wanted it to be as true to form as possible, as like you're almost digging the hole with me type of thing. And then oh wait, let me see. So then I made these really cool. I think they're really cool. I think they're funny. Actually, they're one of my like favorite pieces I've done. So tying back to like the whole digging, I made a thing, a piece of like recipes of how to dig these holes.
Yeah.
So like how to dig a hole, and they're super specific. So like it becomes frustrating for it could become frustrating for the viewer, and even more frustrating for myself, because I view recipes as like, you know, a series of directions, and you're going you're gonna try and make the dish, right? For example, you're trying to make like a pot pie, and if you don't follow the directions, it's not gonna, be the same pot pie that you wanted to make. It's gonna be a different version of that pot pie, but it's still gonna be pot pie. So that's the way I see the holes as well, like super specific times, super specific with the day, super specific, oh my God, that's bad. Super specific with like the weather. And so, and plus the materials. So basically, I wrote out like the day that I went out to dig this hole. And then I created it as directions, as specific as I can. So I was not able to recreate it in the future, but a similar version of that hole, but it's not the same one. So, like, for example, Tybee Beach hole digging recipe between 11:35 a.m. and 1:35 p.m. And I have my materials, I have my prep time, and then I have the dig time. And, you know,
Can't dig anymore.
what?
It says until you can't dig anymore.
Right,
You
exactly.
can't dig
And,
anymore.
there's like, I think a humor aspect behind this, because, why would you want to go do this anyway? Type of thing. And, you know, you know, number 14, ignore the physical pain. Number 15, feel frustrated. 16, feel nothing at all. And these are all the directions. Like, I'm telling the viewer how to feel. If you were to go and attempt this recipe, or telling myself how to feel if I was going to go recreate this recipe. And then my pro digger's note, question yourself constantly. you know
I mean, this directly feels like it correlates with almost any job that you do.
yeah,
Like any kind of work. Like, I'll do it till I feel nothing at all.
right.
And then
Yeah, it
yeah,
definitely has an ode to what labor is and how I see work. And I have a job. It's one of the most repetitious jobs, I think.
what is your
um,
job? I don't even know what your job.
so I'm a part-time paint and sip instructor at the moment.
Oh yeah.
So it's fun, it's entertaining, but it is super repetitious, because I am saying almost the same thing uh, every time I go on stage, and trying and saying the same jokes and trying to make people enjoy themselves and laugh. And so I definitely tie this like type of recipe back to how we do our own jobs, because we do have a set of instructions that we internalize, no matter what it is. And it's like it becomes this mundane thing that we do almost every day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny. I think it's funny. I think I think
I
it's
think
all hilarious.
it's funny, but because it's true. Like this is. I just quit, teaching after 27 years, and I feel like that it was, it's just
Yeah, and then you kind of don't know what to do with yourself afterwards. At least that's what my dad and my mom said when, like, my dad retired, and he's like, I don't know what to do with myself anymore.
yeah, and that like I have there's so many things I want to do that
Yeah.
I'm not really retired. I just quit doing the thing that I had to do,
Yeah.
to and I loved it at first. So it was, I mean, it was like a dream come true kind of job at first, and it was great until it became
Hmm.
really repetitive,
Right.
and it was that repetition that became, and you
Right.
can only change it up as many ways as you can change it up. But for me, it
Yeah.
was like,
And I think that says something to labor and work itself, because at least here in America, we base our whole life and personality a lot of the times around our jobs, and it almost is one of the biggest components in our life, how it, not saying it's like a controlling factor in our lives, but it almost is, because my partner moved down here, to get a job after, she, like, her contract was up in Connecticut. So, she needed to find a job, so she moved down here. Obviously, is like a, part of that was me, but it was one of the only places that like was hiring too. So, there's that aspect of it too, how, you go where there's work,
right,
because you have to have a means of survive, like to survive. And then again, like, it goes into like this whole capitalistic idea of what America is based on. And it's not this, I feel like it's not really the same of how it was, back when,
right.
uh and I guess when my parents were, you know um you know trying to find a job, it was much easier, and they didn't really have to move for their work. But in our day and age, like, at least for my generation, like, we have to go where the jobs are. And I feel like that's part of like a huge, not even like it's a huge issue, but it's
Defining.
definitely something that you see and people complain about, because it's just like, you have to move away from your family, you have to move away from your friends just to survive sometimes, which is, and then I'm just talking about in America, like, I don't know what it's like to live in a different country when it's, in a different uh, political and economic status. So just speaking from my own truths of how, our capitalistic society really runs our lives in that way.
Well, it's so defining. It's how we introduce ourselves to people too, right? Like,
Hmm.
oh, what do you do? It's like the first thing somebody asks you.
Hmm.
It's not,
Hmm.
and like, what, you could maybe find a different way.
Yeah.
you know? Like,
Yeah. It's just interesting because
well, and there's so much
labor,
judgment
yeah,
made in your response, oh, you're an artist, okay, or
right.
like, oh, you're a teacher, these were the things that defined me, or like, if you're a woman and you're not working because you're at home, that, you know what I mean? It's like, why does that,
Yep.
I wonder what we could do. Like, what could be a
That's
better
a different
question?
conversation.
What would be a better question we could ask people when we first meet them?
Yeah.
What's your sign? I don't know. Like, there's
Right.
something else that might define people better. I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a no, that's a whole, that's your next, maybe that's
Yeah.
your next project.
Yeah. And I feel like that's kind of like where I'm leaning towards, is kind of, commenting on our economic society and our capitalistic society, because I feel like obviously when you think about work and labor, you think about the terms and conditions of that work and labor. So I think that's something that I'm gonna end up exploring next for sure. Yeah.
I think that would be super exciting. I mean, the broken ceramic shovel
Hmm.
is just wonderful too. And will you show, do you have the bubble wrap one?
Yes.
Okay, so the first shovel is a real shovel, right? And then the
Yeah. Okay,
ceramic,
I'll go through it. So this is my shovel, my tool, but as sculpture, because thinking about an art object, what does it mean to have an object on the wall that it's something that you didn't make, but you made it into an artwork, you know, almost thinking about Marcel Duchamp and how he did very similar things, and you know, kind of challenging the authenticity of what is art really, and what can be considered art. So that always was super intriguing to me. So when I did a show at the Gutstein Gallery, where Ben, I don't know if you know Ben, I'm gonna say his last name wrong. Sorry, Ben Tolson.
In our, was he in the program
He's
or
a
no?
curator for SCAD.
Oh,
Yeah. And he asked me to be in the show. It was a group show, and he's like, "Oh, have you ever thought about, your tool, your shovel as a artwork?" And I was like, slightly, I was like, kind of, but I never really got there. And so, as I thought about it more, I was like, all right, yeah, let's hang it on the wall and see what that does. So we hung it on the wall next to the bubble wrap shovel, and then also a cardboard shovel. And so, for me, it's still kind of like a developing idea where we're taking an object, putting it on the wall, it becomes a non-functioning object, right? So it's originally functioning as its intended purpose, but now I'm stripping it of its intended purpose and putting it on the wall. So does that make it more valuable now as an art object? And then what happens then if I take it off the wall to reuse it? Is it still an art object after that? You know what I mean? Like questioning what is an art object and what is a sculpture.
did you come
And
up with an answer on that? Or you
no.
like, I was just like, I want to answer that, but I don't know if there's a right
But
answer. You know?
I mean, I think that, and I think it goes back to like all of these other shovels, right? Um, like I feel like I have some sort of an answer, but I don't have the full answer that I wish I had, because when you're thinking about, a shovel made out of bubble wrap, its intended purpose is to be non-functioning, but still try to be functionable. So then
Have the appearance of function, right?
it
Like
has the appearance of function, but it also doesn't because of its material, and it goes back to its materiality. So then you're thinking about, a regular shovel, its materiality, it has a metal spade. So obviously it's going to perform, but when you take its performance away by putting it up on a wall and calling it art and not using it anymore, then you're stripping it of its purpose. So, and I'm trying to strip the bubble wrap of its intended purpose as well, because bubble wrap is supposed to be for, making sure other objects don't get damaged. But I'm trying to I'm manipulating the bubble wrap and making an object out of it to resemble something that was functionable.
well, and even the bubble wrap is meant to protect things, and you're using
And
it.
then to destroy
Yeah.
the ground underneath me, or to dig a hole.
Oh, it's so great. I love it. So,
So
put a price tag on it when it's on the wall, and it will be worth what you say it is worth. Like
exactly,
the
right.
bubble wrap, the ceramic shards, like it's all, I think that's an interesting, yeah.
It goes, and it makes me think
Different,
of the banana that
that's
was taped on the wall, you know what I mean? And then taking it off and eating it. You know what I mean? It has a very similar um, connotation, in my opinion.
I love it. Yeah, great.
Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think so? What is your answer then? If you know, you said I might have an answer.
Yeah, like if you take it off the wall, does it lose its value? Like that's, and you put it on the wall and it has value. Us, you know, unassigned value.
Right.
Take it off. I mean, I think the wall is an interesting dynamic in that. Like
Mm-hmm.
right now, I have 35 paintings not on a wall. So what is the value that they have because they're not on a wall? Do they have more value on a wall? Like the idea of the wall is an
Right.
interesting
Yeah. Even like
element
the
in the
space
conversation.
too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the knowledge of what it is and what you're trying to do. Like
Mhm.
if somebody doesn't know that this shovel is $250,000 shovel that was on a wall in an artist gallery, to go with this whole thing, does it lose its value because the person doesn't know it has value? It's
Right.
just there's so many layers of ideas and conversations and thoughts. And like, I think the whole thing is just brilliant, really, really smart.
Thanks.
And
It's a little, it's, I appreciate you saying it's smart. It's a little silly too, but I think
oh,
that's important in it all as well.
yeah, humor it stems from intelligence, right? You can't be funny if you're not smart.
There.
Well, unless people are laughing at you, and then that. That's funny.
That
You know
could be
what?
it too. It's
It's
all a
funny,
facade.
so you're all set, right? um, they might be laughing at it, but they're not laughing behind your back because you put it right here. Like that's
Yeah.
all. Laugh.
Yeah. And after the whole all the digging and the holes and the shovels, like I moved on to scrubbing and sweeping and like sweeping like the streets. And this is a video still. So I'm sweeping a construction site when they weren't there, and I was sweeping all of their garbage and dust off to the side, but I'm not really doing anything with it. I'm just brushing the dirt, really, just to move it around. And like I said earlier, almost like a form of painting. Um, uh, and this happened like when I was doing this, it was like in early May. And so it was kind of like when COVID was starting to really take a toll in Savannah, at least. Everything shut down. And I went down to River Street, which is like one of the most popular areas for tourists. It was like a ghost town. So it was really interesting to almost have the whole block to myself, besides like a handful of people walking with dogs or their family, and then a few cars on the street. So, being like almost eerie that I was sweeping up, like it started to make me think about like sweeping almost like the memories of what was there. You know what I mean? Like, even though that wasn't really my initial intention, it was mainly to sweep the street. And, knowing that the streets, the outdoors is never going to be like a clean. It's never going to be like this pure form of what we consider clean, because people are still going to be, eventually or whatever, and there was people out there going to be walking around on top of what I did. If I'm sweeping in the middle of the road, cars are going to be, running over where I just swept. Wind blows, there's animals, like all of that. So that was what I had in mind originally, with that whole thing. And there's other stuff that I could say about it, um, during that. And I wish I don't have the photo right now, but there is a giant sailing yacht that was docked. Yeah. And I'm probably going to talk about that in class today. There's a giant sailing yacht that was docked at on the river, and I swept in front of the whole length of that yacht, um, thinking about, again, consumerism, capitalism, what work is to other people, what is hard work to other people. I'm here hard at work sweeping in front of a giant yacht in the parking lot, and their hard work is being a fashion designer and being a successful fashion designer and a successful TV producer. So it made me think of everyone's hard work, and everyone's labor is different, but it doesn't mean that one is better than the other.
Right. Yeah.
so yeah, there's like a lot of things. Like I feel like a lot of these thoughts and ideas become super complex, and I think that's why I have a hard time sometimes writing it down in my thesis, because I feel like I could go on and on and on, but like I don't want to bore people either when they're reading it.
Well, like I said, there's so many layers
Yeah.
to the meaning, and then there's the surface layer, right? And then all the different philosophical layers and different directions that you could take it
Yep.
to. So I can see it would be hard to like really find and stay in a lane when it's not lanes. There's just layers of understanding.
Hmm. Branches. I like to call them layers is good too, but like I think of branches of like almost like a root system.
Yeah, and they continually seem to cycle back to this idea of labor and value,
Hmm.
and like finding. I think as an artist, one of the most disconcerting questions I get is like, how long did it take you to make that? Right. Like, and it gets asked over and over and over again. And
Hmm.
I've equated it to like they're trying to figure out what my hourly wage is,
Right.
and it's just something that's not quantifiable. I mean, you can't.
Hmm.
So
No, yeah,
it's it's
I totally understand what you're saying.
like,
Yeah.
let's get away from that idea that to make a living you have to work so many hours.
Hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
it's a futile, frustrating thing,
Exactly.
that's
Hmm.
how we define ourselves.
Yeah, and it's yeah, that's literally this whole thing is based around futility.
Yeah. Such
How
such
how work is
interesting work.
futile. Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. How hard work is futile, you know?
Yeah.
And then
But then there's this satisfaction in working hard. Like you're sweeping,
yeah,
you're not getting paid an hourly wage to sweep, but there's also this thing that happens in your head, like that is good.
right,
That
serotonin is
labor.
firing in your brain, and
Yeah.
you feel good about what you did, but and 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 then there's nothing wrong with that either, like I'm human, I feel that all the time, and I'm not that type of person to be like, a Debbie Downer in the situations. Like I try to live my life as best as I can, but still, recognizing that, this shit's pointless all the time, but like it's also not, because I'm doing it because I like to and I don't really care.
Well, and that leads to like this whole other thing where like we're like accumulating wealth, right? Your whole life, you're like working to accumulate stuff, a house, cars, bank account, like all this. And then as you get older, you work to get rid of all that stuff.
Right.
I'm watching my parents just trying to get rid of all this stuff.
Yeah.
They spent all this time and energy accumulating it.
Hmm.
I'm like,
Yeah.
hmm, you
Yeah.
know,
It's it's a very interesting cycle,
it really is.
very bizarre, but it's the world we live in. That's how people choose to live the majority of the time.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just found your research and your artwork really interesting and inspiring, and
Thank you.
you're doing like really cool stuff. So I can't wait to see what you do in the future too, because I think
Thanks.
you're going to be like, I knew her when,
You're like, I have an original interview now. I
Original.
make it. We'll see.
Yeah. No,
Well, I'm glad at least one person finds it interesting.
oh, I think I'm sure a lot of people do. It's
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah.
Make
I
work
mean,
and share it.
yeah, and and I don't know how much time we have left, but I'll just
Oh yeah, yeah.
quickly go over it, but I did, scrubbing, and it was kind of stemmed from the idea of sweeping, um, because I'm thinking about cleanliness and, what else is a different type of labor besides like the physical labor of jigging is like, um, like I think of it as like obviously like an outdoor type of labor, like a very much more construction way of thinking, but what is more domestic way of thinking. And um, so I thought of cleaning and, scrubbing and thinking about, it kind of was by chance at first of thinking of what color would be best. And then I was like, oh, well, I pulled out blue. I literally just pulled out a color out of my the, my box that I had on my painter's box, and I was like blue, and I was like, oh, well, blue is the color I associate it with clean. I associate it with almost like a purity. And so I was like, all right, I could work with this. So I painted a canvas, and it was a raw canvas, so it was just untreated. It didn't have any gesso or anything on it. And I painted it, and then I scrubbed it away. I'm kind of thinking about the form of erasure too, in a sense, and scrubbing until like the pigment falls off. But what I found is that I ended up destroying the canvas because I was trying to clean it so hard and scrubbing it so hard that it fell apart. um, and so it becomes like an artifact of the action and of the process and of something that once happened. And I view these as not only paintings, but also as an art object, or like I said, like an artifact that you would see in a museum. And that's how I associate them, as a memory of, you know, of an event that happened.
Well, and to get that to happen to the canvas
Mhm.
requires a great deal of labor, right? Like
Yes.
that doesn't just,
It was honestly more painful than digging a hole for
yeah,
hours.
yep. I would
Because,
imagine to get
yeah,
it to disintegrate like that must have been.
mhm. Yeah, my shoulder was pretty rough, but I got a little bit of muscle now there. But
Well,
yeah, it took a long time. And the way I would do it, I would use like warm hot water mixed with bleach to try and erase, because I was trying to figure out how I could erase the paint and what would, kind of strip the pigment. And I was like, experimented with a few different products, and I found that bleach was working the best. And but in doing so, the bleach also started to deteriorate the substrate. And so it started to cause rips. And, kind of deciding when to stop scrubbing was one of the hardest things to figure out, because I could literally just keep on scrubbing until it's just fibers and it's nothing and it's not attached, which I have done before because I'm missing like a whole section here. And this is one, it's front and back. Um, so it really was kind of like a give and take, and just trying to figure out what would be better. And now I'm thinking aesthetically, um, because I had some criticism of, it shouldn't, you are an artist, like we all think in terms of beauty, and we should think about the aesthetic and what you want to show and how you want it to be viewed. And I took that into consideration. So I decided when to stop rather than going until it was nothing, which I think worked out. Yeah.
yeah, I think, yeah, these are, you know, the concept of the criticism that helps to change
Hmm.
the work, or at least gives you an intention to think about, well, what do I want to leave behind?
Exactly.
There's another
Mhm.
good.
Right. So it's, there's some more thought process in all of that, rather than, a pure form of process, which I understand is like, could be like, okay, cool. But like, I also decided, like, I do want these to look interesting, you know, and I think that's a goal for artists anyway. is for something to be interesting. And I do feel like that I did lose that a little bit as I was doing a lot of these action and process based works, is that I might be doing something interesting, but what is the final product? Is that interesting too? And I want it to be also visually appealing to my audience.
Well, and it's interesting now because, film can be your artifact that's left behind from the work. So,
Exactly.
is, is the film the artifact, or is the artwork that you're
So
deconstructing I mean, so
yeah,
the criticism is, that's, but there's also the opposite of that. Like,
yeah.
you know,
And I think the videos are more for process, because these are like a form of performance. Um, so I want people to see the performance as well. For a while, I didn't really care if people saw or not. It really wasn't something I thought about.
the intention behind it.
Right. So, the recordings I think are just, they're important, but I don't see them as an artifact. I see them as just a video of the performance, whereas this is the artifact of the performance and of the action that took place, you know, and this is where we view that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what's another one?
I like these too, with the writing. There was one that was, do you have one? There's one,
Yeah, I think it was this one.
that one.
Hmm. Yeah, blue is nothing but shoulder pain. Yeah. So, as I was, doing my blue series, um, I started, because like I said, my shoulder was shot, and that's like what I was like, oh my god, my shoulder in so much pain. And then I was like, blue is just shoulder pain, and literally that's what I thought. And I was like, that's interesting. I wrote it down, and I came back to it, and I decided to paint it on a canvas, and text, painting the text and in blue paint. And it's that's another type of artifact, is scrubbing away the pain, but I'm still in pain while scrubbing away the pain. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be, did you ever think about hiring someone to scrub it for you too? That would have,
No.
that's a whole new layer. Like, it hurts. I'm going to hire somebody to finish that for
Yeah, that would be interesting. That person might be a masochist, but
me.
but
Anyway.
yeah, it's pretty interesting, because if you look back to labor, like you're paying someone to do
Something you don't want to
something
do.
for you,
Yeah.
a service almost. So that's an interesting thought. I never thought of that before.
Well, and like, I like to stretch my own canvases and feel like it's part of the process. And somebody said, well, you should have somebody else do that, and you should just spend your time doing the painting.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, why do I want to pay somebody else to do it when I feel like it's part of my process, right?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
part of everything that goes into the work. Is
Right.
as much of it as I can. I want it to be something
Like
I did.
your hands touched it. Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
and
I get
I
that.
personally like the way it feels when I stretch it versus a store-bought stretcher,
Yeah, yeah, I get that too.
No, I mean, I don't know. It just is different, but
Yeah, for sure. That's an interesting concept, and I think I might put that in the back of my head for now and kind of mull that over, because I think that's interesting, and I never thought of that. So you might have just gave me an idea. Um,
need somebody to do it.
yeah,
Yeah,
put it
yeah,
on Craigslist or something.
yeah,
But yeah, so for this piece, again, thinking about repetition, because all of the actions that I do they're all repetitious in the movement that I do. It becomes like a muscle memory, from the digging to the sweeping to scrubbing. It's all the same movement over and over again. So kind of like wanting to, repeat that cycle and have more of that repetition showing in my work is, almost obsessively writing over and over again, blue is nothing but shoulder pain, all down a canvas, and then trying to erase it again, and then doing it again, and then erasing it again, type of deal.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super exciting.
Yeah. And yeah, that's that process shot. And yeah, that's my work list and everything.
This was for you did this for your 45 hour? Is that when?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it couldn't
How
have
was
been
that?
it wasn't in person, so did it through Art Steps.
Oh, okay.
Um, so I created a virtual gallery space, and then I had to show them my committee this PowerPoint, and then we talked about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your work with me.
Well, thank you for having me. This is great.